So this video is the second part of the pathology of cardiovascular disease area that's on the cardiovascular part of Unit 2, and it will cover cholesterol. So cholesterol relates to the previous video that I've talked about in terms of atheromas and atherosclerosis, so you need to be able to relate this to atheromas. So if you don't understand that, it'd be worthwhile looking at the previous video. So cholesterol, then, you need to know the general features of it. So cholesterol is a lipid, right? And lipids are generally fats. So cholesterol is needed in the body. It generally gets quite a bad rep, but it is used in the body to make a bunch of things. So it's used to make two main things in particular. It's used to make cell membranes, and also it's used to make sex hormones. Now these sex hormones are the ones that are released by the sex organs, so for example the ovaries or the testes. So these hormones would be your testosterone, and then estrogen and progesterone. So not the ones produced by the pituitary gland, okay, so the sex hormones produced by the sex organs. So in cholesterol in your body, all your cells make cholesterol. But there's a vein site in your body which is the largest producer of it, and it's in the liver. So 25% of all your cholesterol is made in the liver. And your liver will also get rid of any excess cholesterol. So cholesterol, the sources of that, apart from in your cells and in your liver, would also be in the diet. Okay, specifically fats in the diet. Now we generally talk about saturated fats being ones that are high in cholesterol or that are linked to cholesterol in the blood. And so if they're high in the diet, then generally your blood cholesterol will be higher. So there's an increase in cholesterol in the blood. Now, cholesterol, because it is a fat, is not soluble in water. And because of that, we need to transport it around by being carried on something else. So they're transported by being bound to things called lipoproteins. And there are two types. So you can shorten these and use these shortened names, it's completely fine to do that. So there are two types of lipoprotein. There's high density, which is referred to as HDL, so high density lipoprotein. And you have low density lipoprotein, which is therefore called LDL. Now generally when I talk about the two different types of lipoprotein, the HDL and LDL, HDL is the one that is generally a good guy, and LDL is normally the bad guy. Now LDL gets a bad rep because you do actually need LDL in your body and it needs to transport cholesterol, but generally if you have too high a concentration of LDL in your blood, that relates to atheromas. So what I'm going to do now is compare these two, so their function and then why they then might cause issues in the blood. So here I've got a quick table, okay, with LDL and HDL on it. So LDL is what I was referring to as the bad guy. So they both transport cholesterol. LDL transports cholesterol from the liver to the body cells. And that's why I've got a diagram of a body cell here. So that body cell, on the exterior of it, has receptors. And specifically those are LDL receptors. And this wee diagram here is showing an LDL molecule with cholesterol attached to it. Now, these LDL receptors allow the body cell to take in the LDL and the cholesterol. Now your body cells will recognise when it has sufficient cholesterol in it. So when sufficient levels of cholesterol are reached and that cell produces enough, contains enough cholesterol, the cell will then undergo or will utilise negative feedback. Okay, so that would mean that the LDL receptors, or the synthesis of those receptors, are inhibited by negative feedback. And to show you what I mean by that, if your cell has sufficient cholesterol in it, it doesn't want to then pull more LDL into the cells to then add more and more cholesterol into the cells. So what it would do was prevent any more of these being made. So if these receptors are not there, the LDL can't then be drawn into the cell and therefore remains in the blood. Okay, so the issue with this is the LDL would then remain in the blood. And therefore cholesterol also attached to that LDL remains in the blood. And it will circulate in the blood and then eventually it might deposit that cholesterol in the arteries. Now we know from the previous video that atheromas will contain fatty material, and that fatty material is generally cholesterol, or typically cholesterol. So if you deposit cholesterol in your arteries, that would lead to the formation of atheromas. So this is why I generally refer to the LDL, even though it's required and necessary, as the bad guy, because it links to atheroma formation. Okay, so LDL is from liver to body cells. Negative feedback will then inhibit the synthesis of those LDL receptors if there's sufficient cholesterol in the blood. So LDL will stay in the blood and it will deposit cholesterol in the arteries, and therefore that leads to atheromas. Now the HDL is the one that basically stops this from happening, or tries to reduce the likelihood of this happening, because HDL will transport excess cholesterol from the body cells back to the liver. And there the liver will then eliminate it. So essentially get rid of it. Now for that reason then, because that HDL gets rid of the excess cholesterol, it prevents that buildup. So it prevents the accumulation of cholesterol in the blood. And therefore, because it prevents that accumulation of cholesterol in the blood, it prevents the formation of atheromas, because less cholesterol means less likelihood of atheroma formation. So hence why HDL is the good guy in this, because it cleans up that excess cholesterol, gets rid of it in the liver, and then prevents accumulation, so prevents atheroma formation. So for this now, what you need to then relate this to is trying to reduce general cholesterol, so you reduce the likelihood of atheroma formation. Okay, so this is to do with lifestyle choices and habits. Okay, so people can be recommended they would reduce their cholesterol if they had a high level of cholesterol in the blood. Okay, so first of all, you need to know that cholesterol can be detected using a blood test. And if it's found to be higher than normal, therefore you would then try and recommend that the person does a certain number of things. So generally what you want to do is increase your HDL levels and decrease the LDL levels. Therefore that leads to less cholesterol in the blood. And therefore if there's less cholesterol, there's less of a risk of atheroma formation. Okay, so to achieve this and to try and increase your HDL, decrease your LDL and decrease your cholesterol in general, there's a few things that you can do. So regular exercise is good because generally it will then keep a person leaner, but regular exercise will also increase your levels of HDL in the blood. You can also reduce total fat in the diet, because if you reduce fat in the diet, then therefore you would reduce cholesterol. Now your body still needs fat in your diet, so therefore what you can do is replace the saturated fats, which are the ones that tend to link to cholesterol levels in the blood. So replace those saturated fats with unsaturated ones, as they're the healthier ones for your diet. In addition to this, you can also take certain pharmaceutical drugs. So doctors can recommend that statins can be taken. So statins are drugs that would then inhibit the synthesis of cholesterol in the liver. Now when you inhibit the cholesterol synthesis in the liver, therefore you reduce the cholesterol in the blood. Now generally statins are only recommended for people that have really high blood cholesterol, and they would generally do the first few things first, or at least in conjunction with that. So this is really what you want to remember. So more HDL, less LDL would decrease your cholesterol. So regular exercise would increase your HDL. Reducing fat would decrease your cholesterol in general. Replacing saturated fats with unsaturated ones would do the same. And then statins would be your kind of last ditch pharmaceutical alternative. Okay, so that summarises generally your pathology of CVD with relation to cholesterol.